Good morning, everybody. Pastor Rob here. It is, gee whiz, Tuesday morning already. Phew. Anyway, I hope everybody's doing good. Big announcement. We finished two of our interviews so far. We have several lined up. But tomorrow, we're going to be interviewing former NBA basketball player with the Chicago Bulls and played about 11 years in the pros, ball player and devout Christian David Wood. So we're going to interview him tomorrow and hopefully have that interview out either this week or next. But looking forward to that. We were talking to him last night, so exciting news. He committed to do the interview, and love David because over the last few years that I've known him and watched him, he's got four sons, very talented, and but more importantly, David is very devout in his faith, very outspoken, and man, I love his boldness. So we're looking forward to interviewing him tomorrow and getting that interview out to everybody within a week. So today we're going to continue our study in Mark. This is lesson number 52. Again, we are in the last week of Jesus' life. This will be Thursday night. We're in Mark chapter 14. This is his trial. He's just finished his meal with the disciples Thursday night. He went over to Gethsemane, finished his prayer, and then he's arrested, and now he'll be tried. He's going to have 6 trials, 3 before the Sanhedrin and the high priest, and 3 with the Roman government. So he'll go from the Sanhedrin, the high priest, like Annas and Caiaphas, back and forth, and then he's going to go between Pilate and Herod. He's going to be tried all night. Jesus will be up for well over 24 hours during his trial, and then by 9 o'clock on Friday morning, he'll be crucified. After Pilate delivers him to the Jews, and under Roman authority, they give them permission to crucify him. So anyway, hopefully that's better. That's where we're at. So let's go to Mark 14, verse 53. And this begins his trial right after his arrest. So Mark 14, verse 53, it says, they took Jesus. This would be the contingent that was with Judas, the Roman soldiers and the police, so to speak. They took Jesus to the high priest. This would be Caiaphas or Annas. And all the chief priests, the elders, the teachers of the law came together, and Peter followed him at a distance. So Peter's watching. John, we're going to find out, is there. If you read the book of John and his account, John is with them. And many of the disciples are actually following, not all recorded. But so they take Jesus to the high priest, the chief priest, the elders, and the teachers of the law came together. This is forming the Sanhedrin, the governing body of the temple, the rulers, the Pharisees, Sadducees, all together. Peter followed him at a distance, right into the courtyard of the high priest. So we know Peter's near. And the reason I bring that up is because the question often comes up, how did the disciples know if Jesus was arrested, what he said when he was with the high priest and so on? And what you're going to find out in John 18 is that John himself was in this room with them and brought Peter in later. If you read John 18, you can see that. So this is how we know, firsthand account of how this trial goes and what we're seeing and hearing, or what we're reading today. So they brought Peter into the courtyard of the high priest, and there he sat with the guards and warmed himself at the fire. So he's sitting outside the courtyard, he's warming himself. We find out from John that Peter is outside, but John is inside, and John will bring him in. So it's very important to note that, because some people will say, and it has been challenged, how do they know what happened when they weren't in there? Well, this is how they know. They were there. Verse 55, the chief priests and the whole Sanhedrin were looking for evidence against him. They didn't have any evidence. They were looking for evidence so that they could put him to death. But they did not find any. Here's an example. Many testified falsely against him, but their statements didn't even agree. So if you've ever been an investigator, if you were a police officer, you know somebody, one of the things you want to do is separate your witnesses. You want to get their individual accounts to find out what happened in an incident. And if they don't agree, you know something's wrong. And that's what's happening here. They're coming in and testifying about Jesus Christ, but none of their stories are adding up. So they have no evidence whatsoever. Verse 57, then some stood up and gave this false testimony against him. We heard him say, I will destroy this man-made temple in 3 days and will build another not made by man. Now we know it took 46 years to complete the temple. The Bible's very clear that when Jesus said he would rebuild the temple, he was not speaking of the temple building, he was speaking of the temple, his body. Destroy this temple, his body, and in 3 days I will raise it up. Remember, they're trying to say he was speaking about the physical temple, and it was very clear, even the disciples knew he was not speaking of the temple, he was speaking about his body. However, he knew the temple would be destroyed. It did happen. He's not raising that up. He was speaking of the body. So, yet even their testimony did not agree. So all these witnesses are bringing in testimony, and none of it agrees. Then the high priest stood up before them and asked Jesus, "Are you not going to answer?" So he's quiet. Like a sheep being led to his shears, he was quiet. This is prophetic. Isaiah talks about this 400, 500 years or longer before this even happened. And so Jesus doesn't answer any of these false accusations because it's not worth it. They're not going to listen, even if he speaks the truth. The only time Jesus is listen or responds is when it's a challenge to his deity, his authority, or his place as the Son of God. So then the high priest stood up before them and asked Jesus, "Are you not going to answer? What is this testimony that these men are bringing against you?" But Jesus remained silent. And this would be Isaiah 53 would talk about that before this happened. And there's no reason, again, as the Bible says, not to cast your pearls before swine, because if they're not going to listen, they're not going to listen. And I always say, if you're talking to somebody about Jesus Christ and all they want to do is argue, don't waste your time. Go to somebody that will engage you in good conversation, intelligent conversation. If they're genuinely seeking about Jesus Christ, this may be a divine appointment. Somebody that's genuinely seeking, and you as a believer can go to that person and give them answers that they're looking for and the hope they're looking for from the Bible. That's worthwhile conversation. Don't get into heated debate unless that's your calling. Some people do that very well. You see the guys on TV and on YouTube often debating. There's an advantage to that. There's something to look at and learn from that. But you're not going to convince people that don't want to believe. But if somebody's genuinely interested in the truth found in the Bible, engage them in conversation. Be respectful, be kind, state your truth from the Bible. So Jesus remained silent and gave no answer. Again, the high priest asked him, "Are you the Christ, the Son of the Blessed One?" Now here he's going to respond because this speaks of his deity. And he says, very, very interestingly, "I am," said Jesus. And that's very good because that goes all the way back to Exodus 3. And so I am, said Jesus, and you will see the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of the Mighty One and coming on the clouds of heaven. So basically, he is the authority of God. He is the favored one. He is the Son of God. That he's not going to let be debated. But all the lies they're throwing out, he's like, what's the point? They're not going to listen anyway. And that's just strategic. And we should also take that same mindset. If they want to argue, let them argue. If they want the truth, give them the truth. The high priest tore his clothes. "Why do we need any more witnesses?" he asked. "You have heard the blasphemy," claiming to be like God, from Leviticus 24. So Leviticus 24 is the blasphemy laws and stuff like that. "What do you think?" They all condemned him as worthy of death. Then some began to spit on him. Now look at the heart of his accusers. Now Jesus is remaining silent. He's not giving up a fight. He's been very respectful. But look at the heart of the religious leaders. They all condemn him, worthy of death. Then some began to spit on him. They blindfolded him. They punched him in the face. They struck him with their fists and said, "Prophesy." Now they're heckling him. And the guards took him and beat him. They heckled him. Look at the heart of the religious leaders. This is why I'm very careful, and we should all be very careful to say, I'm not religious. I'm a believer in Jesus Christ. I'm a believer in the Word of God, because religion, I don't like religion either. And I think we should be very careful how we use that. I'm not religious. I'm a believer in Jesus Christ. I'm a sinner saved by grace. I'm a student of the Word. Things like that are much better suited for you than saying I'm religious, because that has all kinds of stereotypical definitions. And if you don't define which quote unquote religion you're from, people can just give, they can have all these preconceived ideas, presuppositions in their mind about who you are. Let's steer them away from that. Let's steer people towards the cross. I'm a follower and imitator of Jesus Christ, a student of his word. I'm a sinner saved by grace. I'm nobody special. I'm a sinner saved by grace. Those are very powerful words, and they don't set yourself up for failure. There's no boasting. There's no identity other than I'm a sinner saved by grace, covered by the blood. I've made mistakes. I'm going to make many more mistakes, but by grace through faith, I'm saved in Jesus Christ. That's the best way to answer those questions. So the trial's going on. He's at the Sanhedrin. He'll go from Annas to Caiaphas to Annas, or Caiaphas to Annas to Caiaphas. There's three trials there. I think it's Caiaphas to Annas to Caiaphas. So he goes through three Jewish trials, and this goes on for hours. So this is probably somewhere around 10 o'clock at night, midnight. He won't be crucified till 9 in the morning. So he goes through three trials with the Sanhedrin, and then he's going to go through three trials: one with Pilate, one with Herod, and back to Pilate. Does three trials with the Roman government. So let's look at verse 66 of Mark 14. While Peter was below in the courtyard, one of the servant girls of the high priest came by. When she saw Peter warming himself, she looked closely at him. So she's studying him. She's like, this guy looks familiar to me. Who is this guy? She's realizing he's not with the normal crowd. And if you've ever been from out of town, people that are in town know you're from out of town. And there's another thing too. I think it's in Matthew that says they know that Peter's from out of town, that he's a Galilean because he has an accent. And I like that because when you travel the world or travel the country, you can often tell where people are from by their accent. New Yorkers have they have an accent. People from India have an accent. Russia has an accent. The Americans, when we go overseas, they know that we're not from their country because we have an accent. And that's what happens to Peter. You have an accent, but you look familiar too. We know you're not from around here. So while Peter was below in the courtyard, one of the servant girls of the high priest came by. When she saw Peter warming himself, she looks closely at him. You were also with the Nazarene. You were with Jesus, she said, but he denied it. There's the denial. Remember, Jesus said before the rooster crows twice, you'll deny me 3 times. Jesus foretold this. He has that infinite knowledge showing his deity. And so he knows this is going to happen. So, Peter's saying, oh, I'm going to die with you. And Jesus is like, be humble, dude. You're going to deny me 3 times. So he denied it. I don't know, and I don't know or understand what you're talking about, he said. And he went out into the entryway. When the servant girl saw him there, she said again to those standing around, this fellow is one of them. But again, Peter denied it. After a little while, those standing near Peter said, surely you are one of them. You are a Galilean. In Matthew 26, it's how do they know that? His accent gives him away. But in Matthew 26:73, as I have a little note here, he has an accent. So they recognize you're not from around here. Your accent is different. If you're from Wisconsin, if you're from Pennsylvania, yins and yous and all those things that you taught, this is what gives you away from not being a local. And so Peter has the same issue. We know you're not from around here. And then it says he began to call down curses on him. So basically he's starting to cuss and swear, but he wants to heat off of him. He says, I don't know this man you're talking about. And immediately the rooster crowed the second time, and Peter remembered the word Jesus had spoken to him. Before the rooster crows twice, you will disown me 3 times. So, very interesting. But one of the most intimate look at this is in Luke. If you turn to Luke 22 and understand the situation, when he denies Jesus the 3rd time, and this is how we also know that he was near Jesus, so he could hear the trial taking place, and we have an accurate account. It says here in Luke 22:60, when Peter denies Jesus the 3rd time, this happens. And this is described in Luke 22:60. Peter replied, I don't know what you're talking about. Just as he was speaking, the rooster crowed, and the Lord turned and looked straight at Peter. Then Peter remembered the word the Lord had spoken to him. I couldn't imagine being Peter at that time. Now, we all are going to have times of denial, perhaps. Certainly, if we do an overt sin, we're denying that we are who we are in Christ, and we give away to that sin. We give into the flesh. It happens. It happens. Don't beat yourself up. That's what grace is for. It's not for a license to sin. Grace is there in case you make a mistake or fall in the flesh to be forgiven. It's there to keep us, to forgive us, to keep a clear conscience if we can. And so this here happens. The Lord turned and looked straight at Peter, and I can't imagine the feeling he had. and thank God for grace. And could you imagine God looking you right in the eye and going, "Man, you just let me down"? That's got to be crushing. Your parents, a close friend, staring you in the eye and saying, "Man, you just let me down." That's crushing. And so he goes outside. It says he actually weeps. And just remember too, in John chapter 21, Peter's restored. Jesus asked him 3 times, "Do you love me?" And so he asked him as many times as he denied him, "Do you love me?" And restores Peter back to his, he has that he's been validated at that point through Christ. It's okay, man. I know what happened. I forgive you. Let's move on. And so that's the trial. If you got to read all 4 Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, to have a full account of what Jesus is going through on his final night. Remember, this is Thursday night. He's going to go to Caiaphas, to Annas, to Caiaphas, the high priest, to be tried 3 times. This is all Thursday night. Then he's going to go to Pilate, to Herod, and then back to Pilate. There's 3 more trials all through the night. And somewhere around 6, 7 o'clock in the morning, he will be delivered over. Now, this whole time he's being beaten, he's being insulted, his beard's being pulled out, he's being punched, he's being spit on. He's been up over 24 hours. And then he's going to go in his final trial with Pilate. And Pilate finally says, by the way, in Matthew, after arguing with his wife to stay away from this man, Pilate delivers him to the Jews. And then they send him with the soldiers. They beat him some more. And then they put him and walk him out with his cross up to Calvary. And he's crucified. So he's been up over 24 hours. He's not eaten. He's not slept. He's been beat all night. And he won't be crucified until 9 a.m. the next morning, which will be Friday morning. So that's where we'll go to tomorrow. We'll be in Mark chapter 15, where it says very early in the morning. So very early in the morning, the trial is over. He's been tried all night, beaten all night, starved all night, lack of sleep. And then by 9 o'clock, he'll be on a cross. So let me check my final notes here. Just remember a couple things. In Luke, Jesus looks at Peter on his 3rd denial. His accent gives him away. How do they know he's not with them? He's not a local. His accent gives him away. And in Matthew 27, remember, Pilate's wife says, "Have nothing to do with this man. I've had a dream about him." So there's these neat little caveats within each chapter, within each version from Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John that give very specific details about the trial of Jesus Christ that night. All of them different, but they fulfill a big picture and make the picture much more clear. And none of them disagree, by the way. They're all perfectly in line. They just add a few more details, as would any eyewitness account given if you were at an accident, if you were at a crime scene, if you saw something happen at a grocery store, if your kids bring in a story. They all have something unique that they saw from a perspective that somebody else didn't see. This doesn't discredit the account. This actually adds color to the account, and kind of like puzzle pieces, they all come together to present a more clear picture. So anyway, I hope everybody has a great day. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for being a part of this. I'm so great. Please subscribe, like, all that. It helps us, as you know, to grow the channel. And we're gonna have more visitors tomorrow again at 10 a.m. or noon our time. I'll be interviewing David Wood for our interview this week, who played for he's been all over the Mavericks, the Chicago Bulls. And he's a great man of God. He has 4 sons, and I think they all play basketball. We'll find out for sure tomorrow. But certainly, just be a good testimony to hear another story about how a career went and how David follows Jesus Christ. And just a great guy to look up to, a great man of character, tough basketball player, just an all-around good guy. And it would be good, for kids to hear and see, to be inspired by the things we don't see on the news. Godly men leading godly lives and godly families that have some type of position in sports or other things that can show that, hey man, we can be normal, we can love Jesus Christ, even when we're successful, even when we're in the limelight, we can still speak and live for Jesus Christ. So anyway, have a great day, and I will see you all tomorrow morning.